How's it going, guys? Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Phil Talk Sports Podcast. It's been a while, about a month. Sorry about that. With it being WrestleMania season, the Wrestle Report has kind of taken center stage. But as that starts to come to an end, I hope to get more Phil Talk Sports episodes out there. Joining me, as he did on the last episode, so not much has changed. Nick Rice, how's it going, man? Good to have you back.
Good. Actually, a lot has changed. If you could see right behind me, I threw in a pretty cool poster of Kobe after the 2010 finals. And then just expect more of the backdrop extra stuff to come in
Yeah,
later
Nick
dates.
finally got tired of me giving him crap for just having a blank wall behind him while I have all this crazy stuff going on behind me. So he finally
Yep.
had enough of it, and he went out to make a change. Nick also got vaccinated, so there's been a whole bunch of stuff going on over on his side of the country.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know, the craziness that's going on with you, but it seems like I could barely make it to the show today. Hopefully, I can make it through it.
Yeah, hopefully, if Nick just kind of keels over at any point and we just stop the show, you'll know why now. But no, I have not gotten mine yet. I've not had the opportunity to. I might in the future. I don't know. There's plenty of people that should probably get it before me, but if the opportunity comes along, so be it. So far, I'm good. I get tested all the time. I've been negative every time, so I'm feeling relatively safe. But you mentioned the other madness in the world. You got to be talking about March Madness as we finally reached the Final Four segment of it. We'll talk about the four teams left, who we think will win going forward. But before we get to the top four, we haven't really gotten to talk about the tournament at all. Obviously, it was a semi-bubble format, the entire tournament taking place in Indiana, which if there was ever going to be a place that could host the entire March Madness, it is Indianapolis, because they love their basketball there.
Yep.
First thing, knock on wood, because we only got the 3 games left if you count the championship. They had things in place that if a team, had positive tests, that they would forfeit and the other team would just move on. Luckily, we saw a little bit of that in the conference tournaments. I saw a handful of those, mostly in the ACC. Actually, it kind of could have been what knocked Duke out. They had an outside chance of sneaking into the tournament that ended up not happening. But luckily, we did not see any COVID issues in the tournament all the way up to this point. So to start it out, the bubble has been effective, and that's definitely good news.
Well, first job, good going. You just told people that there's been no COVID issues this tournament, so we all know what's going to happen this weekend. There's
Well,
going to
you
be
heard me
COVID.
knock on wood, so we're good. Don't worry about it.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
fair enough. Well, I'll knock on wood that the tournament finishes the way that it started. It was really exciting with all the usual bracket busters, but usually the brackets would last a little longer.
Yeah.
You and me both had ours terminated pretty quickly on the
Yeah, I
first
mean,
one.
when a team named Oral Roberts makes it to the Sweet 16, I mean,
Yep.
it's gonna. And it was very interesting because when they beat Ohio State, everybody loved it. When they beat Florida, I really loved it. And the more this team was in prominence, like people learned more about the school because they're like, I've never heard of this school. Let me look into it. And there's some
Mhm.
weird, sketchy, ideologies that go on at that school. I don't know how much information you have on this. It seemed a lot
Mhm.
like the town in Footloose. Like you're not allowed to dance on campus. Uh, Females have curfews and the men don't. Just a very strange
I did not
university,
know
actually.
that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a couple others, but I don't want to get super into it. I would look into it if you want, but it was like everyone was happy to see the Cinderella school, and then they looked up what this school was kind of about, and they were like, I don't know if I want to, cheer for them anymore, kind of thing. And right around that time, Arkansas obviously took them out when their last minute three, went left or whatever, and Arkansas did take them out of the tournament. But there was a couple other. Obviously, Loyola had another great run into the tournament. And you want to talk about a great run is UCLA, the 11th seed that's sitting in
Yep.
the Final Four right now, which as a native Californian, I know you went against your Trojans when Alabama played them, which I gave Nick a lot
Yeah,
of shit for. How
that's
do you
right.
feel about UCLA? Are you UCLA guy at all, or are you cheering for them at any level?
At some level,
Mhm.
I think Bill Walton has plenty of cheering to go around, spread across all of the state of California. But
Yeah.
in general, this run is just it doesn't make any sense
No.
when you look at the numbers and all that. I mean, it just literally and that's what March Madness is.
Yeah.
There's teams like Oral Roberts, Loyola Chicago, where they were making fun of their starting five and their big man, or it's like this guy
Oh yeah.
should be bagging groceries. He should not be guiding a huge run in the tournament. And that's the amazing thing. It reminds me of like a Frank Kaminsky at Wisconsin a few years ago. It's like this guy should not be crushing the competition.
Yeah.
And that's what's cool about March Madness.
And I think a theory that's kind of I've seen pop up, and I kind of subscribe to it, where some of these bigger teams, obviously this was a weird year. No Duke, no North Carolina, no was it
Mhm.
Kentucky? Kansas was in there for a spell, but like a lot of those blue bloods. Here's a stat for you. This is the first Final Four in the history of the tournament that does not have a team from east of the Mississippi, and that's obviously
Yeah.
where a lot of those blue bloods, like I just mentioned, come from. Obviously, Kansas was in the tournament, got knocked out kind of early, and
Mhm.
some of these other teams that you'd be familiar with, but with the COVID crowds, and there's been people, but obviously not the raucous situations that you're used to. Some of these bigger programs, other than playing in it this year, aren't used to it. You get a school like Oral Roberts, who they were barely over 500 when their year ended. They just won their conference tournament. That's how they got into this thing. You get to a big arena like this that has 200 people. They're used to crowds
Yeah.
like that. Whereas these
Yeah.
big schools, it's got to throw you off a little bit. I could only imagine if I'm used to playing in front of, you know, 18,000 people in Cameron Indoor, and it's or
Mhm.
not thousand, but you know what I mean, a packed stadium in Cameron Indoor, and then now you can, I can if someone sneezes in the third row, I can hear them. Like that's got to throw you
Yeah.
off if you're not used to it.
Right, for sure. And they were talking about that in the Baylor game where it was almost as if Baylor got off to a good start and the opponent couldn't get back into the game and the crowd had something to do with it. It was just so dang quiet the whole time. One thing that is interesting that you brought up a little earlier with the Blue Bloods, UCLA, I believe his name is Dufresne, something like that. Guy with the dreads
Hmm.
was crushing it the other day for UCLA in the Elite Eight. He is a transfer from Kansas. Another player who's going to make a huge impact in this Final Four is a transfer from Kentucky. I'm curious, not just the irony of all those teams out in the same year, but I'm curious if this is anything more than just a coincidence that players aren't competing for the blue bloods as they are these other schools for this year transferring out. I find that
Well,
kind of weird.
yeah, I mean, I do think some of these blue bloods are finally getting out of the one and done business. Like I think Mike Krzyzewski and stuff has kind of said, like, you look at, Cade Cunningham is more than likely the number one overall pick. He went on a little bit of a run with Oklahoma State, but like that team with the one and done guy has almost never. I think the last time the one and done guy won a title or went deep was when like Kyrie Irving was on Duke, but he
Yeah,
also missed half the year due to injury. So I think
right.
a lot of these guys are realizing that they need to get out of that business if they're in the business of building a team and winning the tournament.
Mm.
So yeah, I agree. I mean, these transfers are getting harder and harder to keep track of. I mean, UCF was a beneficiary of them this year. They kind of had a pretty up and down year. I'm looking forward to what they do next year. But like, you can't really, not that you were, but like some schools complain about it when three guys transfer out and they bring three more in. So it's like if you're benefiting from the transfer system, you also can't really complain when it moves on. And then there was it Tyler, not Tyler Johnson, but the guy from Duke that basically quit on his teammates, with 2 games
Right.
left in the year or whatever, and just to get ready for the draft, and now he's like barely a first round projected guy. I think really what it gets down to me, and this is maybe a whole nother conversation altogether, is there's not as many one and done level talents as people think there are. Like, did
Yep.
Zion deserve to be one and done? Sure. Did somebody like Kyrie back in the day? Sure. But there isn't necessarily gonna be one every year. There is because people think that highly of themselves and they surround themselves with people that tell them the same. But like
Yep.
Cade Cunningham is great. I think he would, he's probably gonna be something in the league, but like he's not someone that like, oh, what is this guy doing at the college level? He's so dominant. Get him out of here. Make him millions. Like it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if he stayed another year. But when you're the projected number one overall pick, I get it. But the
Yeah.
one and duns to me, it's gotten out of control a little bit. There's not as many of them as we are led to believe that do well.
And that school up there in Spokane, Gonzaga, just kept on moving along
Yep.
behind the radar while all these schools were getting these huge one and done prospects. And Gonzaga has 30 straight wins in 5 straight years. That's an all time NCAA record. And that includes the teams where back in the day, great NBA players would stay for 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
And you hear about that this time of year with Houston now advancing to the Final Four for the first time in decades that they used to have such a juggernaut that continues year after year. But just working in the conference, West Coast Conference, Gonzaga was always this juggernaut, but no one, it seemed, wanted to admit it. And
Hmm.
now we have to admit it because the one and done schools, all of them are watching Gonzaga in this incredible run this year.
Well, Gonzaga reminds me a lot of you mentioned that Wisconsin team from a few years ago. I think it was 2015 where they lost to Duke in that great championship game. That
Yep.
team was just it was seniors. It was essentially grown men,
Mhm.
still in college back in the day. Like I my old guy phrase when I bring up basketball with like some of the guys I work with, they're a little younger than me, not by much, a couple years, but like the thought that Patrick Ewing played 4 years in college would blow somebody's mind today. That'd be like
Yeah.
Zion staying 4 years at Duke. I think it's a very comparable thing. So when I look at a team like Gonzaga, it's four guys. It's a team with the guys that have been there 3 and 4 years and have clicked in the system. They know what each other's thinking. You don't get that at these other programs anymore.
Mhm.
And they've been very good for a long time, but they're on the cusp of doing something that hasn't been done in a while, which is an undefeated season capped off with a championship. They're 2 games away. I'm not super familiar with Gonzaga, but it would be great for the sport to show you that you got these one and done guys and you got these, teams that try to just get all the talent together and make it work for a year, and then they all scurry to the NBA. But no, the team with
Mhm.
the trophy at the end is this team that really worked for it and built
Yep.
over it, many years.
Yeah, I just find that great, and it's the same. And I'm drawing a blank on the name of the head coach, but in working with the conference, I've done plenty of work for the University of San Diego, and watching them play, it's the same thing every year. They have a very brilliant mix of big guys and a very fast, quick guards, and it's just very well coached team. Nobody is hogging the ball; it moves and everyone's getting the open shot. It's an incredibly well coached program. Whenever they come down to USD, if the Toreros were on their A game, and you know a little bit about USD considering Stetson,
Yep, yep,
all
definitely.
that. When they weren't on their A game, Gonzaga, I just vividly remember one game they beat them 110-40. If
Whew.
you're not on your A game, Gonzaga will embarrass you. And yeah, just ask USC.
Yeah, San Diego, they must take some of those lumps in basketball and put them on the football field because they're pretty dominant
Yep.
in within conference in football, obviously at the FCS level. But
Mhm.
nobody's too happy when they come to town, when Stetson or anybody else in the league really right now. So they must take some of those beatings and transfer them just some beatings to other people on the gridiron. Mark Few is the name of the coach, by the way.
Mark Few. Why?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know why I can remember that.
Yeah. So we talked Gonzaga. I want to touch one more thing on UCLA. It's important to note that this is a team that was in a play-in game. They weren't even in the round of
Mhm.
64. They had to go to the round 68. They played Michigan State in a game that could have easily gone the other way.
They were down 14
Right.
in
So
that
I
game.
mean, they could have been like, why do we even show up here? Like, you don't even get time to unpack your bags and your season's over. And now here
Mhm.
they are. You got Baylor number 1 seed, Gonzaga number 1 seed, Houston a number 2 seed. So it's not a super surprise that they're there. And as a UCF fan, I'm pulling for Houston all the way because every round further they make it into the tournament, the American Conference makes another $2 million. So for all of our wallets, Houston, keep it going. And then you got
Nice. All
UCLA
right.
sitting here as an 11 seed. So you got a 1, a 2, and an 11. Like nobody could have picked that.
Yep, for sure.
So
Um,
before we get to the games themselves, I want to talk about March Madness in general. Just the bracket thing of it. I think we've touched on it. My pick at the beginning, I always outthink the room in these things. I really wanted to pick Michigan. I love the story of Juwan Howard coming back to his alma mater and doing what he couldn't do as a player and win a championship as a coach. And that is still something that could happen, and that's still a Disney movie that could get made because I would love to
yeah,
see it. I think I like Juwan Howard as a player. He seems to really embody his playing style as a coach, and you can see positive things going for Michigan. I really had to talk myself out of picking Michigan, not that it would have mattered because they're out. I ended up going West Virginia. I kind of just went with what's a solid team. Arkansas was also another team I considered picking. So
that was
all three of those
my pick.
teams are out now, but they got fairly far, so I didn't feel too bad about it. Who is
Yeah.
your bracket still alive? Your winner?
Arkansas. Yeah, they
Okay,
were
so
they were
we
out.
were around the same we were on the same level then.
Yeah.
Um, what I do love about it, like we did the brackets at work, and like some guys don't even watch basketball, but it's easy enough to just guess, who's gonna win, and everybody can be included. That's why it happens in offices all across America. It's something that like you can't play fantasy football if you don't know the sport. You can't bet
Mhm.
on games if you don't know the sport. But literally anybody can play March Madness. You always hear the joke of
Yeah.
like, "Oh, my girlfriend or my wife or my fiance, she outpicked us and she just went off what mascot she liked better." Like it's just funny about that sometimes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I do love the way that everybody can be included in it. Here's what I don't like though. I don't like the one guy that claims that he watches all these teams and knows all these things about these obscure teams. Like if you try to tell me you know something about St. Bonaventure, like I'm not gonna buy it. So that's the one thing. As there is positives, the guy that tries to like puff out his chest and say I know basketball better than you. Never really care for that guy, and I also don't care for the guy that will make multiple brackets and then brag when his fifth bracket ends up being a decent score. I do make multiple brackets, but if somebody asks me who's you pick in your bracket, I picked West Virginia. That was the first bracket I did. I did a couple others with some other strategies, but I'm not gonna like. I think one of them has Gonzaga winning. If that ends up happening, I'm not bragging about that bracket. That was one of 4 that I made. The one that I made that I put out in the universe is my West Virginia one. Didn't work out. Maybe next year Mountaineers. But I don't like the people that makes a bunch of brackets and doesn't mind bragging about them all, and then tries to tell me that they knew about Oral Roberts when they first started. Other than those guys, I love everything else about March Madness.
Yeah. Well, if you had a second hat, I'm sure it's somewhere and all that, stuff back there. For the brand is one. Don't be that guy is probably the logo for the other hat that you have. That's probably the one. And I know we're touching March Madness and the teams that are on here, but just I think this relates to what you were saying. But this is why when I talk to a lot of folks about football and basketball, I don't even ask. They volunteer this information. I think this is a wide percentage of the population who loves college basketball because of the parity, and why, even though I love college football, when you get to the top of the top level, it's based on a couple of teams. As of today, a couple of teams dominate the sport. And that's why Gonzaga is so cool. And that's why a UCLA is so cool. It's because they're both in the same spot, and they both have a pretty good chance of winning because March Madness is so cool. It's one and done, and there's a lot of great talent everywhere. So, and we brought it up, guys from Kansas and Kentucky are competing in this tournament for, transferring to different schools and really making a name for themselves. So that's what I think is really cool about March Madness. And you don't really get that a lot of other places, even the NBA, and we might bring it up tonight, but it's a totally different ball game.
And what's nice about March Madness, like at the end of the day, like most years, this is kind of the outlier year. Most years, those big brands are there at the end, but instead of it being the same 4, it's at a pool of like 10 or 12. So like, at the end of the day, your Dukes and your North Carolinas and your Syracuse and your Villanovas tend to make it up farther than the other schools. Yes, but the road to get there is that much more entertaining. And I think that's what matters. And this is the perfect year to, I don't know if I didn't do this research, but with UCLA in that play-in game, I don't think a play-in team has ever reached the Final Four before, because that play-in concept's only a couple years old. So I could be wrong on that, but just the proof that somebody could pull that off is shows you that anybody can truly win this thing.
They talked about a VMI school. They definitely were a bottom seed, and they made
VCU by chance.
VCU, yeah, maybe.
Okay, because I remember they went on a run a couple years ago.
Right, something like that.
But it is cool that just about anybody can win it, and that's why we're where we are. And at the end of the day, we have 2 number 1 seeds and a number 2 seed. So by the numbers, they shouldn't be overly shocking. But then you have that 11 seed. So we'll go ahead and just, I watch a decent amount of college basketball. I've watched a lot of this tournament. One thing I've noticed about it though is I almost don't even bother watching the first half of any college basketball game. I will turn it on in the second half because teams are up 20, down 20. It does not matter. So I will I almost always, if I'm home and I turn it on, but I don't even fully start paying attention to games usually until the second half, because you mentioned, UCLA was down 14. We had guys down 20 and up 20 in this tournament. So like I've watched a good amount of these games, but usually starting in the second half for me. And I also love we both work in basketball. I don't know how you feel. I love the 2 20-minute halves. I know it would never happen in the NBA, but I would actually be all for it instead of the quarters. I kind of just like the first half, second half. I just a random tidbit for me. I don't know how you feel about it, because like when you work college basketball, I'm sure it's set up the same way.
Yeah. So actually, because we don't really go over all of this stuff before we do our podcast, me and Phil. This is going to be something you and me kind of disagree on, because I commentate women's basketball too. So you get the quarter system there, and then I do men's, and it's the other way. And I know men's would never switch to the quarter system because you can throw in more commercials. Quarter system, you're taking breaks every 5 minutes.
Yep.
4 minutes for men's. We won't get too much into the quarter system. Don't worry before you switch the pot to another podcast. Yeah, you and me just disagree on it. I'd say mainly because I have a short attention span, so I like the quarter system a little bit more.
I
But I have
definitely
no
see
issue
that.
with the halves, man.
I do know that the women's game used to mirror the men's, and they used to do the two halves. And what I've always heard is the reason they switched it is they wanted to make it as close to the WNBA rules. That way, the women's game could just have one standard set of rules, which understandable,
Yeah.
definitely a good enough reason to do it. And maybe I do just like it because it is such a mix from every other brand of basketball
Mhm.
does the four quarters. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I mean, we've worked both amounts of games. The amount of time the game goes is relatively the same. So I don't know that you're saving time doing it one way or the other, but maybe
Right.
it's just a nice break in action.
For sure. You can plug in more commercials that way, but
I mean, if you're ESPN, you can plug in as many as you want. I don't know how many times we've had a TV timeout, and then the ball rolls out of
free throws
bounds, and they do
coming out.
another media timeout, and then so trust me, if they want
Yeah.
their commercials in, they're getting their commercials in.
I was gonna say, as you're bringing it up, why you don't, watch the first half is interesting, and I think they're catching on because it always seems like more fouls are called late in games,
Mm-hmm.
obviously more timeouts and
Yep.
more media timeouts,
Mm-hmm.
but like the first half takes 30 minutes, the
Yeah,
second
it
half,
blows by.
and like the first half is 30 minutes, and the last 3 minutes of a game is 30
It's 30
minutes. It's
minutes.
just
Yeah.
crazy.
And you're right though. I think what I really mean by that is like if I turn a game on and it's still in the first half and a team's up like 12, that means absolutely nothing. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like
yeah.
there's too
Oh yeah.
much time left in the game, especially the way these guys shoot threes these days. So like
Mhm.
back in the day, like you turn on a game or watch UCF or Duke or Florida State or they're up 12 and 7 minutes left in the first quarter. I was like, oh cool, they're at least they're playing well. They have a lead, but it means
Yeah.
absolutely nothing because there's too much time to come back. And so I'm not saying I never watch the first half of a game, but I really, if it's a game I'm interested in, I'll really dig deep into it once the second half starts. Because to me, that's when it's like the fourth quarter of a football game. A lot of cool stuff can happen, but if the game is still close and the fourth quarter starts, you're like, all right, something's got to happen here to really break that. It's really something I've only started in the past year or two noticing that like you can kind of turn it on at the start of the second and you kind of get the whole story of the game still with
Oh
college.
yeah.
And really, it's only in the March Madness season too because there's so many games to watch. So you don't necessarily have time to watch everything. So all right, I'm gonna see how this game ends. I'll see how this game ends, and then you keep jumping around or whatever. But I'm sure my fiance is happy that March Madness is ending at the end of the week because I've been watching a lot of basketball the past couple weeks.
Was she one of those that picked the best mascot to advance?
So when we did our NFL picks during the year, thank you to everyone who actually jumped into that group. She won a couple weeks basing it off the mascots. So I mean that's definitely
Nice.
something, like it's like, oh, the Bears and the 49ers, well, a bear would probably beat a gold miner, so she picked the Bears and the Bears would win. Like she'd base it off of that.
Oh, that's
So
funny.
so
Well,
that
I'm
worked
sure
out.
she lost a lot of those bets last NFL season with the Bears, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
another
You
one.
got to they had a pretty good start to the year actually when you think about it. The Bears,
Yeah.
they
Wow.
were like 5-1 or whatever they were. So before we get to the NFL, because that was almost a good segue to do so, real quick, we got Houston and Baylor. I think this is the first time that two Final Four teams will face off from the same state of Texas. I'm sure it's happened in other states, but Baylor looks incredible right now. I'm
Yep.
going to pick Houston here just because I already talked about my ties with the American Conference and stuff. But Houston, they're also the first team to make it to the Final Four, not playing a single digit seed. Every team they've played this far has been a double digit. So that might, the jump in talent might be a little much for them. But I mean, Baylor has been playing incredible. So I would not be shocked if they beat Houston. But I think it'd be cool to see Houston make it to the championship.
Well, this is my moment to, with no regard to the actual topic, plug in Alabama real quick. Their basketball team went on a huge run because they were one of the nation's best rebounding teams. And in the first two rounds of the tournament, they rebounded like madmen. I mean, they were like plus 30 in each game on the boards. It was insane. And then they lose to UCLA in overtime. And it was due to the ball not bouncing their way. And Houston has really benefited from the ball bouncing their way throughout the tournament. And I think that ends. Baylor, they not only have the second best offense in terms of rating, but they give up the some of the fewest field goals in the entire nation. So this is a team that plays well on both ends. Houston is marveled for its defense, but Baylor is every bit as good on the defensive end too. So I've got the Bears.
That UCLA Bama game was actually one of the. I mean, there's been a lot of great games this tournament. That was one of the better games.
Oh yeah.
When the 2 free throws were missed at the end of the game, I sent Nick the Reggie Miller, choking emoji just for the guy to hit a game tying three in their face and my face to go to overtime.
Yeah.
They kind of ran out of gas after that, but I think everybody can admit, if Nick likes Alabama for reasons I still haven't figured out, but if Alabama won the national championship in football and basketball in the same year, we would never hear the end of it. So for the sake of our sanity, I think we can be happy that it didn't happen that way.
They should have made those free throws, man. Jones, the SEC Player of the Year, was 2 for 7, but I'm not counting, and I'm not mad about it.
Yeah. So the other game, we already talked a little about UCLA, the underdog that could. They came all the way from the round of 68, the 11th seed, taking on Gonzaga that's on the doorstep of history. What are they, 30-0, I think, at this point? So they got 2 more games to go. 29 of those 30 wins have come by double digits. So not only are they winning, but they're winning big. We already talked about how likable of a team they are. This is not a group of one-and-dones. UCLA has nothing to be, ashamed about or everything. It's been a great run. I think it'd be a little silly to pick against Gonzaga this deep in the game here. So I will go with them. I think this game will be closer than the stats indicate, just like every game for the Bruins has been this tournament. So I think this will be a great game. Out of the 2, this might end up being – I can't really decide which game I think will be the closer of the 2, but I think this one will be more entertaining, I think, because the way Gonzaga has to play to win and the way UCLA has stayed in games, I think this will be – I think the Houston-Baylor game is going to be more of a, late 90s, early 2000s style game. You mentioned the rebounding and stuff. It's going to be a lot more physical, where the Gonzaga UCLA might be a little more high-flying, but I will go with Gonzaga on that one.
Yeah, I think you and me overthought the room when we picked West Virginia and Arkansas. I think I had Gonzaga out in the Elite Eight. This is a team that's rolled through the entire year. I just almost felt like they were so dominant that they were going to take a team a little bit for granted and give up a lead. But obviously that didn't even happen against USC when they were up double digits like seconds into the game.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting, Gonzaga played USC in the Elite Eight the other day, and USC is one of the nation's best shot blocking teams, and they had 0 blocks against Gonzaga. They have the number 1 offensive rating, the number 1 field goal percentage. Gonzaga is led by Drew Timme, second best in the nation in PER. This is such an incredible team, and they play a team in UCLA. I'm going to read you the teams that their offensive rating is worse than. They have a lower offensive rating than South Dakota, McNeese State, and any other year this would be a compliment, but they have a lower offensive rating than Duke, 59th in the country. And we already talked about how unprecedented they have been, just going from down 14 in the round of 68 to making it to the Final Four. I don't see any way this game is for UCLA. I think Gonzaga wins. The line is 14. That's a good football line, 2 touchdowns. This is a basketball game. I think Gonzaga rolls.
I will say this. I did have West Virginia, and they're obviously not in it anymore. I did have them beating Gonzaga in the championship. So if picking Gonzaga brings them there, so I can at least get some extra points on that bracket by putting them there.
Right.
I don't know why. That's kind of cruel of me to put them all the way to the championship undefeated and then lose to Virginia. I should have just rolled with Gonzaga. But hey, I woke up feeling dangerous today that I filled out my bracket.
For the brand, don't be that guy. This would be the first team to ever do it. So, you were picking against, for history.
Yeah.
Or whatever that is, so.
I can't remember the last time. I know UNLV almost did it. They lost to Duke back in the day. I think the last team to go undefeated was like those older LSU or UCLA teams. Honestly, it's been that long, in the 70s and 80s. But it should be a great, end to the tournament. We got 3 games left. What would you think about if the 2 losing Final Four teams played like a third place game? Do you think that has any like precedence here?
Well, first of all, I actually think it'd be cool to have a best of 3 for the national championship.
No, I don't think you can.
You don't think so?
No, you can't do sudden death all the way to the championship and then let you drop a game. You said it earlier. I think one of the things that makes it so cool is that it is win or go home every game. So I get the concept behind it, and I think they would love the money that 1 to 2 more games would bring. But I don't think you can it's the parity of anybody can beat anybody on any given night, and you kind of take that away when you go best of three.
Yeah. I hear you. I love the extra basketball.
Yeah.
It's like it's over. But in terms of the consolation, I'd be cool with that too because you have all the teams there in Indy. You might as that's a way you could throw
Yeah.
in an extra game,
Mhm.
and there could be some sort of prize for that. I don't know what prize you could throw in there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like the World Cup, like the championship teams get there, and then they have like the bronze medal game, and people are still show out. Teams are still happy to go home with a medal and whatever. So just an idea. We're
Yeah.
not the
I
only
have an
ones.
idea before we change topics. I have an
Sure.
idea. They could stop tipping off games at 5:14 p.m. That's when the first game, 8:34 p.m. for Gonzaga and UCLA. Why?
Hey, you got.
8:30 is fine.
Also, you got to remember for me too. Like some of these late games, I've only seen so many of them because they're starting at 10 p.m. Like
Right.
that sucks for me over here. So I wanted to watch Michigan and what was it UCLA. I wanted to watch that game, but I mean it started at 10. There was no way I was staying up that whole time when you got to be up for work or whatever.
You got to
So
make another
I,
edition of WrestleMania. How about that?
well, that's on the weekend at least. I can I
Oh, okay.
can I can watch that on Saturday and stuff. But we're not the only ones that have been talking about and adding games to seasons because the NFL, how's that for a segue, has officially
That's a
added the
good segue.
17th game to the season. This has been talked about for a lot of years. It apparently is finally happening. I assume I'm pretty sure this is the case. You'll get like an extra home game every other year, and then you'll get the extra away game, filled in. Is how I
How
think
they
this
did
is
it
going down.
before you continue, all AFC teams this year host that 17th game, and then next year all NFC teams are going to do
That's
that.
how they're doing it. Okay. So again, this has been talked about for a while. On the surface, I don't mind it. It's gonna take me forever to like, oh, they're a 10-win team. Like that means just a little less now because 10-6 looks for some reason a whole lot better than 10-7, and you can't go 8-8 anymore. So that's gonna be interesting. It's just we've had these 16 my entire adult life or my entire life that I've followed football. It's been this 16 game season. So it's gonna take a little bit. First off, I think it'll just take a little bit to get used to. And
Yeah.
I think we're all gonna enjoy the. Does this also mean one less preseason game? Like, do they at least give us that? I don't know.
Actually means two less preseason games, if
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
mistaken. I
Okay.
think they're going down to two.
All right.
But we're gonna have to double check. I know
Yeah,
they
yeah.
they reduced. Now that I say it, I think it might be three, and I think it
Mhm.
might be two if they go to 18. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, yeah. You can. I'll look into that while you're
All
giving
right,
your
all right,
thought.
thanks. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, that's the format, and it's an intra-conference. So the big marquee matchup, I was trying to look up who's playing who in that 17th game, but Chiefs and Packers is the marquee game for the 17th, and that pushes the Super Bowl back a week. So that's played in LA on the 13th, if I'm not mistaken. So the start of the year is going to get pushed back to preseason, but the regular season is going to start as usual, Labor Day onto that second week of February. Did you
Still,
find what you're looking for?
I'm still looking for it here.
Okay.
I don't see. You think that'd be in one of the first sentences?
Right.
Home for the season. Yeah. Okay. We'll find out more. But overall, I think it'll be good if they. I think you're right about the 18. It'll take 18 games for them to drop
Right.
two
And
preseason
my
games.
only issue with it, I don't know about you, it's just an odd number. That's literally the only issue I have with this. I love more football. I do
Hmm.
feel bad that players on a year that they're taking less money
Hmm.
because of COVID and the salary cap decretion, that all of a sudden they have to play an extra game to earn that money. So
Yeah.
that definitely is an issue.
I mean,
That
if
I
again,
understand.
if they're blocking out a preseason game and replacing it with one of these, that helps a little bit. And if they ever go to 18 and they take away another preseason game, to me, they need to add a bye week. You need to have 2 bye weeks
Oh
and
yeah.
18
Oh
games.
yeah.
Because if you like the original concept of the NFL, I think in the early years it was an 8 game season, but then for a long time they sat on 10 games. They eventually made it 12 games. And then I think there was a 14-game season. It was
There
always even
was.
numbers, is my point. So you're
Yeah.
right. This might be the first time ever that it's an odd number by design.
I hear that really the only issue with the 18, because they were talking about it a couple years ago, was the
Yeah.
fact that there was such a huge push with player safety, and it just would look kind of weird.
Hmm.
But 17 looks weird too. You have guys like Alvin Kamara, like, hey, we're risking our lives, and it's a car crash almost
Hmm.
every play every week. So it definitely is an issue. And I think the NFL, before they go 18, if they go 18, they're going to have to say, hey, we're going to make it even easier for the quarterback. If you blow your hand in the vicinity of a quarterback, all of a sudden the flag's thrown. Just
Yeah.
all joking aside, I think they're gonna, we're gonna see NFL even less and less recognizable from the 80s and 90s by the time if they had an 18. And to me, it's the only, it's the even number, an odd number. That's my only issue with it. I love extra football, so
Yeah.
I'm all for it otherwise.
Speaking of player safety, I know I'm like several years late to the party, but I finally saw that concussion movie with Will Smith. Have you seen it?
I saw part of it. I didn't. I actually wasn't interested to see the end of it, but
It was
it
very
was
powerful. It
interesting.
was very good. Not to
Yeah.
to give a movie review on like a 5-year-old movie here. It's just so we have Amazon Prime now, and it's just sitting there, and I'm like, all right, if not now, when? So we watched it, and like Will Smith, of course, shocker, was fantastic in it, but like
Yeah.
the movie itself, and it's all accurate information, and a lot of it stemmed from like older Pittsburgh Steelers, from like the Steel Curtain defense, and like what they
Right. Right.
dealt with
Right.
post career and everything. It is a rough watch, but it is good. Just you mentioned player safety, and now that kind of stuff comes up to me that
All right.
one thing that's interesting is
Nice plug.
they, they're discovering CTE essentially, but they don't have a name for it yet. So some of the
Yeah.
names that they give it before they give it the official name is it's kind of funny
Mhm.
to see. I guess it's like when you already know the end of the story, like why get on the ship? The Titanic's gonna sink, kind of situation. But
People love the Titanic, man. I'm
hey,
telling you, it's crazy.
it's one of the best selling movies of all time. Back in the day when VHSs were still a thing, if the movie was so long it was on two VHSs, like the Titanic was, and a movie like The Godfather, you're in for something when it's two VHS tapes.
Yeah, when you warned us that you were gonna sound kind of old, I didn't know how old. This is sounding pretty,
Yeah.
pretty old, man. VHS, that's even before your time, right?
No, no, dude, you were alive for VHS tapes. You might not remember, but you've watched movies on VHS for sure. I mean, it's
And
all exciting news now, and like I'm gonna forget about it. I already know I'm gonna be like, oh, 16 games. Oh, we have football next week. Like that's cool. Like I'm gonna totally forget about it. Um,
yeah,
so to give me an extra week of stuff to do, I don't got to go back and watch some old VHS tapes of football. The old self that I am now.
that's right.
But this time of year, obviously, with March Madness and everything, the other thing is the draft is getting ever closer. But before we even get to that, a lot of pro days are starting to happen. UCF's is tomorrow. I think the Gators was today. Alabama's was last week. Are you a pro day guy at all? Do you watch any pro days? Do you care at all?
I've watched 0 minutes of pro day, but I did see a meme about Mac Jones overthrowing one of his receivers and Kyle Shanahan's having this vision of
Yeah.
Super Bowl 54. So of how Jimmy G overthrew that touchdown to Emmanuel Sanders. So
Yeah.
0 minutes of pro day. I don't think I missed anything. The best topic or the best comparison that I heard was it's like one piece to a giant jigsaw puzzle. That's what a
Mhm.
pro day is.
I mean, some guys can really make some money. Like as a UCF fan, I remember like Brashard Perriman was maybe a first round wide receiver, and he goes and crushes his 40, and he gets picked like 11th overall. Like there are plenty of stories that guys have a great pro day, but to me, it's more for the receivers and the running backs. The quarterbacks
DK
throwing at
Metcalf did that a
yeah,
couple of
yeah,
years ago.
Metcalf, exactly. But with quarterbacks, it's like, all right, you're sitting there, you're not getting rushed, you're not even wearing pads, you're throwing to receivers that you've thrown to for 3 or 4 years, and
Yep.
nobody's covering them. You better look good in that situation. I think
Mhm.
there's almost no positive. Like, was it Fields, right? What's his first name? The
Justin Fields.
J-
Yeah.
so Justin Fields, yeah. I guess he had a great like 40. Like you watched him play
Yeah,
all year,
4-4. Yeah.
yeah, which is great, but like you already knew he was fast. This is not new information. If you're a scout and you're just now learning that Justin Fields is fast, get a new occupation because
Yep.
you should have known
Yep.
that back in last
Mhm.
August, not this coming one. Um,
Mhm.
so like yeah, it's cool for some teams. I like UCF's is a little different this year because we have like three guys that can potentially go in the top three rounds and stuff. We got Aaron Robinson, Richie Grant, and then the receiver Marvin Williams and a bunch of other guys. So like it's a pretty good year to get into UCFs in particular, but for the most part, yeah, I'm not big on pro days. I understand they might have a little more importance this year because there's no combine. So
Yeah.
I'll give them that. Nobody going to Indy. Indy's a little busy playing basketball right now, so you can't go to Indianapolis right now. So I think the pro days they might mean more than they ever have this year, and to me they still don't matter all that much.
Yeah. To me, the biggest thing was just over the course of the last couple of months, which I find hilarious, is that people almost forget what happened this last college football season. You see a
Mhm.
lot of guys float up on the surface throughout this offseason when all these players aren't really doing much of anything. They may code it over a wow, he looked good on the pro day, but in reality, a lot of these guys, you love a guy over the course, even Trevor Lawrence. I'm even hearing this with Trevor Lawrence. You love a guy for months, and then all of a sudden, there's rumblings. Wow, Zach Wilson might be better than him. Just
Yep.
look at the competition he played with, and that's the whole case with the March Madness thing. It's almost you're almost better off making your mind like back in January, because
Mhm.
once you start thinking and looking at all these other players, you start second guessing everything, and that's where these teams get into big mistakes, and that's where the Bears take Mitchell Trubisky when it was clear, even just Deshaun Watson. It's like, come on, like,
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like, Trevor Lawrence hasn't really wavered as the number one quarterback, but like Justin Fields for a while was like the no-brainer number two. Right now, Zach Wilson
yeah,
sits as number two. Trey Lance, as I speak this might change tomorrow, is actually above Justin Fields, and now he's just above Mac Jones. And it's like
we're talking
none of these guys,
NFL.com.
yeah, on NFL.com, none of these guys have thrown more touchdowns or interceptions in the past 2 months that these have changed, unless somebody's
Yeah,
playing games in backyards that I don't get to watch. Other than, again, if someone gets like an injury working out for the draft, like then you can maybe assess some more stuff. Somebody gets in
mhm,
some legal trouble, you can assess it a
yeah.
little bit more. But no, the tape will always mean more to me than running around in gym shorts at your pro day to me. Um,
I'd much rather get it wrong because I picked a guy who won a national championship
mhm.
versus picking a guy because he won a national championship in gym shorts and a t-shirt. So I'd much rather be wrong that way than right the other way
It's like
every
back
time.
in the day, the Redskins at the time would have this big splash signing, and they'd always win the Super Bowl of the offseason that would
Yep.
result in like 5 wins the following year. So like winning the offseason almost never really pays off. Other than pro days, another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with the same type of same time of the year is a lot of college football programs have their spring ball situation going on and spring games come up. Same question. I'm a big spring game guy. UCF's is on April 10th. I'm going to be heading out there, which I didn't go to any games last year. So I'm just itching to get back, to UCF and then see the guys running around out there. But like, I don't know if have you ever been to a spring game? You have plenty of college football programs to choose from out there. And if not, do you at
Yeah.
least watch any of them?
I watch them. I haven't been to any, but I've watched plenty.
Gotcha. They
And love it.
definitely,
Love it.
if I have a choice between some pro day stuff or some even when the combine normally or spring, I'm picking spring game 100% of the time.
Interesting.
Definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is really cool to see guys like I'll watch every year, and I'm telling, and I find it hilarious. I just baffle you. I love watching Alabama every year, and it's like there's a couple of guys was like, wow, I didn't know he was pretty good. Like Mac Jones just crushed it
Mhm.
for the spring, over the last couple of years, in fact. And it's like, oh, this guy's from Jacksonville. He looks really solid. He's a pocket guy, but he's been a backup. And he didn't transfer. If he was good enough, he wouldn't have transferred. And here he is setting all the school records. And we didn't get into it much, but all of a sudden now people look months later at his numbers like, wow, let's go ahead and throw him over a Zach Wilson, and let's see if maybe maybe the Niners are thinking about him third overall, something like that. You start hearing that conversation, but basically, it all starts in spring. You start learning the story then, and it's really cool to see them develop.
I think it's boredom too. It's like, hey, how much can we talk up somebody who has no business being, the fifth best quarterback in this draft? And
Yeah.
obviously I'm not a Gator fan. I'm far from it, but like someone like Kyle Trask at least has a little, like he's more of an NFL guy than Mac Jones. They could both be absolute bums in the league. I don't know, but Trask, like you have a fighting chance to have drafted somebody good with Trask. I don't think, and Mac Jones, I guess it would really depend on where he ends up. I'm not saying he doesn't belong in the league and he couldn't be a long time backup or something, but first round talent he is not in my opinion.
I mean, listen, that's why you look at the great quarterbacks in the league, and they're all from smaller schools,
Yes.
and they played against the powers, like Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech, and then Ben Roethlisberger, Miami of Ohio, my guy Philip Rivers, NC State, go on and on. Carson Wentz, North Dakota State. Say what you want recently, but
Yep.
I mean you're playing big competition every week, so and you're on the other side. That always to me means more than when you were Mac Jones patting the football, setting school records because guys are going to be picked first, 10 picks of the draft, that wide receiver.
Yeah, his top two receivers from last year are on the overall big board are 9th and 10th. So like right there, it gives you an example. Like I would hope he would, and it's not one of those little not anybody could do it, but it makes it a lot easier to do. Like we've seen plenty of Alabama quarterbacks like, Greg McElroy, or even when Jay Coker transferred from Florida State. Like there was never any talk that these guys were in it. Like McElroy had Greg McElroy. What did I say? I've said somebody else, but some of these guys have had a cup of coffee in the league, but like there was never talk of them being first round picks. I don't know why Matt Jones is the guy that all of a sudden gets that conversation.
Yeah, hey, Tua was 6th overall, and I actually kind of like Tua, so I fell into that trap. You start listening too much to Mel Kiper, like, wow, this guy's passed for this many yards and touchdowns. So,
and Jalen Hurts, yeah, I know he went to Oklahoma, but he's essentially an Alabama product, and I'm gonna really find out this year how much the guy is not starting caliber. I guess we're really gonna find out, but I mean,
I think you're really gonna find out how good Joe Flacco is. That's just my opinion.
Funny enough, Joe Flacco actually had better stats this past year playing for the Jets in the same amount of games.
Wow.
So very interesting. The Joe Flacco thing, I joked, I tweeted, I was like, oh, look out, Jalen, here comes, elite Joe. I was kidding. Obviously, some people didn't get that. But one thing I didn't realize is, Joe Flacco went to Delaware, right? That's basically the New Jersey to Philadelphia, like New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Delaware. It's just like the sister city. He grew up in New Jersey. Apparently grew up an Eagle fan, and I doubt his career has much, more than a couple years left. So it's pretty cool. I mean, the thought of you get to play an NFL career and you get to finish it with your favorite team as a kid's got to be pretty cool for him. So for what it's worth, I'm here for Joe. I'm curious what number he's going to wear because 5 is obviously retired. So I'm curious. They haven't really said it yet. I don't know. 15's also retired. Me and Hank were talking about this. Maybe 6, maybe 10 because Deshaun Jackson's gone. That's really my biggest thing with Joe Flacco. I'm curious what number he's going to wear.
Is 3 retired?
3's not retired. I think. Who has 3? Could be 3. I don't think anyone has 3 right now.
All right, I just threw that out there.
Okay, well, if it ends up being 3,
what number did Jaws wear?
7.
7. Okay.
Which so did Vic. So did like we've had a lot of 7s. That's the only reason that number's not retired, I think, because we've had a handful of them.
Fair enough.
And it's such a common number. Nate Sudfeld has it now. Like every backup QB in the league has number 7. I feel it's just a good backup QB number these days.
Boy, I didn't research for how many quarterbacks were number 7. Sorry, Phil.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can agree or disagree, but it does seem like it for sure.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think that's going to about wrap it up today. Good to be back. Good to be, making episodes again. And I hope everyone enjoys March Madness. And we'll be back in the next week or two with another episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.